welcome to The Actor and the Engineer. My name is Paul James. I am the actor.
And my name is Josh Knapp. I'm the broadcast engineer.
Here we go, Josh.
All right. So we're doing something we haven't done in a long time. We are doing Should Have Seen, which is a series that has been interspersed throughout our however many years. How many years?
I think
9-year history?
I think it's going on 8 this year.
Okay, going on 8 this year.
Yeah.
Okay. We started in 2014, but it was like in the summer, so we're getting close.
Yeah.
But either way, we both see a bunch of movies, but there's always going to be those movies that just like fall through the cracks, and that like you know people talk about them and you're just like, oh, hey, how about that movie? And you're like, yeah, I actually haven't seen that movie. And then people are like, what?
I know. You haven't seen that movie? I hear it all the time.
Yes.
I
And
do it
so
too,
then-
though. I do it too.
Yeah. Well, but I try to like, instead of being like, I can't believe, I'd be like, oh my gosh, you're going to love it.
Yeah,
Or
totally.
this is going to be huge.
Yeah.
Like you're going to experience something that everybody else essentially has experienced, but you get to do it
Yeah.
all right now. So
I
and
usually
that's
say,
what-
call me after the rabbit hole. Because once they, see the film, then it just spirals into something. Oh, I didn't know he did this. I didn't know she did this. And then it becomes this thing. And I'm like, yeah, call me after the rabbit hole.
Yep. Yeah. So that's what we're doing. And what we normally do is we pick one movie that you haven't seen that I have seen, and one movie that I haven't seen that you have seen. But this time we're doing a little bit different. And I'm interested to see how it goes, because I think we might like it a little bit better, because neither one of us are coming into this with any kind of preconceived notions, other than the fact that we know that the two movies we're going to talk about today have been revered by people for years and years and years up to this point, but neither one of us have really like touched on them or experienced them too much. And we're going to talk about The Searchers, and we're going to talk about Shane. And so first we'll start with The Searchers. And as far as I'm concerned, like there are cultural things associated with The Searchers that I know about, but didn't understand the context in which I knew about them. So the beginning and the ending shot of The Searchers, I knew about. I've seen it multiple times, but I had no idea what it meant, or, who. I knew John Wayne was in it. I knew John Ford directed it, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know about the plot. And I purposely didn't really like seek out, like, I don't do the whole like, oh, I'll just, read the Wikipedia page on it and be good. I don't do that
Afterwards,
stuff
I'll do that.
afterwards, of course. Yeah. Or like, well, is this based on a true story? Is this, all of those things.
Yeah.
And so, but I'm glad that I didn't. And I'm glad that I kind of came into this somewhat, open and not ruined, quote unquote, to this movie. So what about you? What did you feel, or what was your kind of like glancing blow with The Searchers before this?
Exactly the same thing. John Wayne's Walk in Birdcage, which is a funny little. Have you ever seen Birdcage with Nathan Lane? And
Is it the Fosse?
yes,
Like,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he's trying to teach him to butch up a little bit. So he's like, do John Wayne. And Nathan Lane tries to do it. And he's like, not good. And he goes, no, it's perfect. I just never realized John Wayne walked like that. So at the end of this film, I was like, Nathan Lane deserves an Oscar nomination just for that walk, because he got it down.
Interesting.
And John
Oh,
Wayne
okay.
does walk like that. It was hilarious.
Wow.
So really, that's my only thing. I've seen the opening shot and the ending shot. I've heard about this film. Scorsese's a champion of this film. He he speaks about it all the time. It's not any reason why I haven't seen it. It's just, can't watch everything all the time. And then, The Last of Us comes on and I'm in the middle of it. So I'm not thinking about The Searchers. I'm thinking about what's the next Prime show. I'm still doing that Shakespeare thing. I'm on my third production of King Lear. I'm trying to, so it's not anything other than just time. You see these images all the time. You hear the last part of Shane all the time. And we get the line wrong. I just now realized that after seeing it. We
Yeah.
get the line wrong. It's very interesting that it's become part of our lexicon, but we get it wrong. So no, I have no preconceived notions, and I don't have any issues with Westerns. I don't have any issues with the genre. I think as long as it's great for its genre. So yeah, other than knowing about it and hearing about it, and it's on everybody's top 10 list. It's on everybody's top 10 list of best Westerns of all time, 1 or 2 up there. So yeah, it was fascinating to finally sit down and go, oh, okay, this is what this is about.
Yeah.
And it got me. It got
yeah,
me.
and for me, I kind of like went into it like you said. First of all, I am the first person to say that like westerns are not my favorite. Like they just don't call to me. I would much rather handle I would much rather watch whatever Taxi Driver instead of The Searchers. And it's interesting, there are parallels
Yes,
that
there
Martin
are.
Scorsese does
Yeah.
use in a movie like Taxi Driver. But something like that, I'm a little bit more like, show me a character who's broken, but but I didn't expect that in this movie. When I heard about The Searchers, I was like, oh, it's just going to be a cowboy movie. I didn't know it was, was a revenge / rescue / all of these things all wrapped up into the very complex, setting of post-Civil War Texas and the West, and all of these the mid-century directors and filmmakers somewhat in their own way reckoning with what early European Americans did to Native Americans, and it's a lot going on, and I didn't know what to expect going in, and I also did not expect for the John Wayne character to be kind of like not anti-hero, but just like I said, broken character, the as broken a character as he is. So that was, in some ways, it was kind of refreshing, because I was like, oh, there's more to this movie than just a Western. Like, it's not 3:10 to Yuma. I mean, 3:10 to Yuma is fine, but it's not 3:10 to Yuma. It's not like we're going to go here, we're going to do this, we're going to go there, we're going to do that, and then we're done. And there's many layers to this movie, and you can kind of like dig into it in each of those layers. So I thought that was really cool and very surprising. The other thing that surprised me was that this movie is beautiful. Mm-hmm. Like, the setting is beautiful. It's shot in Monument Valley, Arizona, and it's shot on VistaVision, which was something that was only around for like 5 or 6 years. It was something that Paramount came up with, and they're kind of trying to compete with Cinerama Domes and CinemaScope and all these other things. And everybody's got to have their own little tag and their own little way of making these. They got to get people out of their living rooms and back into the movie theaters. And one of the ways that they wanted to do that was big, bold, colorful, widescreen movies, and this was one way to do it. VistaVision. Weren't many movies done in VistaVision. Alfred Hitchcock did a bunch. Vertigo was shot in VistaVision. So, but it's right in that kind of pocket of time and when it was utilized.
Explain to us what VistaVision means.
So VistaVision is most of the time when you shoot in 35 millimeter, you shoot a movie in 35 millimeter film. Each film frame is vertically oriented, so the frame is the top of the frame and the bottom of the frame are I'll just say it this way: the sprockets, the little holes in the film, they're on the left and right of the frame, and there's 4 of those sprockets per frame. So what VistaVision does is it takes that film and it turns it 90 degrees so that all the sprocket holes are on the top and bottom, and the frame itself is elongated or it's twice as wide, and so it takes up 8 sprocket holes. So the picture that is each frame that's being put onto film is 4 times as big, essentially, because it's twice as big on sideways and above. So it's a much bigger film frame to work with, which means that the when you make multiple copies of it, or when you try to do things like large vistas, you get a lot more detail on things that are farther away, like the big rocks in the distance in Monument Valley. So all of that, it helps for larger film frames, and also it helps for things like if you're doing it later on in the 70s when VistaVision wasn't used anymore, the Star Wars ILM, what became ILM, used those VistaVision cameras and the VistaVision film to shoot the plates for all of their, like the TIE fighters and the X-Wing fighters flying by, like all of that stuff, all the motion control stuff. They used those cameras and that film stock because it was a much bigger thing to work with. And so when they did their optical compositing, it actually didn't lose the quality. So it'd be like what they were doing is essentially like making a mixtape, but then making another mixtape of that mixtape of that mixtape. And every time you made a new tape, the sound got worse. That's the same thing in video or on film for them. So if they started with a big, huge, pristine frame, they could, do all of their effects and still make it look good. So that all of that said is that you're using twice as much film, a lot more, like a bigger film frame, and you're filling it with these, beautiful sunsets and these beautiful scenes and these, huge, landscapes, and it's awesome. So I thought that was amazing. And then the other kind of technical thing I'll bring up is their day for night. You know what day for night is? Yeah. So with day for night, they need so much light to shoot. They can't do it actually at night because everything would just look black. You wouldn't be able to see anything. So they'll shoot it during the day, and then they'll crank down the iris. They'll like lower the stops on the film camera, so to make it look like it's nighttime. But John Ford and his cinematographer, who I think was nominated, but
no.
Okay, that's Shane won for cinematography. That's right.
Tons of nominations, 0 nominations for The Searcher.
Yes, yeah. So, but anyway, so John Ford and his cinematographer, they did it right. All of their day for night shots, it was directly at noon, so the sun was shining straight down, so that mitigated the shadows on all of the the brush and all the people on the horses and all that stuff. So it didn't really look like the sun was out, which you would normally see in a day for night shot, because they do it at 4:00 in the afternoon or 7 p.m. or whatever. You got a raking shadow, and it just doesn't look like nighttime as much, because the sun is much brighter than even the moon is if the moon was out in that kind of way. So anyway, I thought that was really cool that they did that, and then it looked a lot more realistic. I mean, it did not look like movies look today when they shoot with digital and they've got a huge amount of dynamic range and they don't have to add a bunch of lights. It didn't look like that, but it still looked very impressive. So those are the two kind of like technical things I was like, dang, this is pretty awesome. And it's in 1956. So, yeah.
So that's an interesting thing that you just brought up, because it's a good transition point for me when you were talking about it doesn't look like now what technology can do now. So I started watching the movie, and then something drew me away, life, whatever. And because I was watching at home, life can draw you away. I was wishing I was in the theater. I was wishing I was watching it on a big screen if it ever comes back out, which they do quite often, especially in bigger cities. And they do that in Richmond too. They have some film festivals. They have some they do the short documentaries here. They do a bunch of things here. But anyway, I'm hoping that it comes back out at some point and I can catch it, even if it's like a second run theater like the Bird or the Narrow, which is like a $2 theater. Narrow being in Norfolk, the Bird being in Richmond. Anyway, both great old theaters. I love seeing movies there, even if it comes out then, because I saw The Wizard of Oz at the Narrow and I was like, whoa, like I've never seen it not on TV, so I didn't know.
Talk about Technicolor too, man.
Beautiful. And it's just so big, and I never knew that they shrunk it for TV, so there are things that are missing on the side. I was obsessed with The Big Chill, and I've seen that a gazillion times. Then I went to see it they reshowed it, whatever, and I saw it on the big screen, and there are two whole things going on in one scene that I had never seen before because it was cut out for the, Meg Tilly is horrible. In the side of this scene eating pasta this whole entire scene, and I have never seen her. Like, I thought they reshot the scene for this re-release or whatever they were doing. I was like, no, that's always been there. They just didn't do widescreen on VHS or T. I know, right? Horrible. Anyway, so my point to that was it's that when my mind got away from the film for a couple of minutes, I started going down a rabbit hole of technology and the thought of, I find it fascinating that, okay, so let's say your cell phone goes down. You're in a big city and your cell phone goes down. It'd probably be hard pressed to find a payphone, but if you found a payphone, you could use a payphone like a phone. If your phone went down in your house, you could use your house phone if you still had an attached house phone, and you would you don't have a mini computer in your pocket anymore, and you can't Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, but you can definitely contact somebody if there's an emergency, and you know the technology. So it's not that different. It's not exactly the same, and it's not serving you in the same way something like this does, but it can serve you. Think about going to the beach and your Bose speaker goes out. What are you going to do? You know, okay, so you don't have your phone, you don't like the way your phone sounds, so but you got a radio and you can always listen to a CD player. I mean, if you have that technology in your house, if you still have CDs, so forth and so on. So yes, you can still have the same thing and your mind can stop and adjust. I'm wondering if people now in 2023, after the hyper realistic films that we've seen in the past 50 years, you know, from the 60s on, if you will, and not just hyper realistic in the sense of everything is clear and everything night for day doesn't exist anymore. All the digital stuff you were talking about. I'm talking about the emotions and the reality and the subject matter, and all of that is some of the subjects of films nowadays would never. You know, Triangle of Sadness. How would that have ever gotten made in 1953? It just never. You just couldn't do it, right? So people have a hard time adjusting to older movies once they've been in this technologically advanced movie world. And I wonder if people who don't, and this isn't a judgment or a snotty statement, but if you're not in love with cinema and you're not in love with film, can you go back and watch The Searchers and let it dissolve into your mind? I'm not so sure. It's meaningless to the conversation that we're having, but it did cross my mind. I would like to also say, I want to say how brilliant I thought this film was and how epic, and how at the end of it you go, oh, this is why. Oh, okay. It's like when somebody finally gets to see Citizen Kane, they're like, oh, okay. Yeah. That said, this film is problematic. And if you're looking at it through a 2023 lens, it's problematic. And there's been article after article written about it. So it does need to be mentioned on some kind of level that I'm not saying that the protagonist or antagonist, depending on how you look at John Wayne in this film, he could be both. I'm not saying that he's somebody to be looked up to. My interpretation might be different than a lot of other people, but we have unconscious cultural biases woven into our DNA, especially at 5 decades of going around the sun. I have stuff that I question. Okay, would I accept that if? Would I turn this off if I wasn't myself, the world that I live in? Is it easier for me to accept these issues than other people? And it might be, but I do think it's important to mention that I am aware that this film is problematic to some people, and I see why. I just always thought it was for different reasons. I thought it was, here's my weird preconceived notion. I thought Natalie Wood was playing a Native American woman and that everybody was mad that they whitewashed it. I thought that that's where that went, but that's not true.
Well, Scar was not Native American.
Totally, and that happened.
The actor who played Scar, yeah.
Totally, it happened.
And he was the only one.
Yeah.
Everybody else was actual, Indians from they were, and they were happy to have the jobs and all that stuff. But it's so interesting that it wasn't like all or nothing. I would have expected it to be all or nothing, especially since the Scar character, it's not like the Scar character is like, waxing poetic or doing soliloquies, which the actor who played that character was a Shakespearean actor, was trained as a Shakespearean actor. Burton, I think was his name.
I can't remember
his last name. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, it's Henry Brandon was his name. But still, it doesn't.
It's a good looking man.
It doesn't make sense to me, like from a 2023 lens. It doesn't make sense to me to say like, no, we're going to represent, Native American people with Native American actors, but then at the same time say like, okay, we're going to take this guy and get some Shakespearean actor or whatever, some white dude essentially or he was a German born actor, but still some white dude to play this main antagonist, quote unquote, in the film, the guy who John Wayne's going after essentially in the film. So that didn't make sense to me. But I see what you're saying though. I mean, and initially you kind of look at this and you're like, okay, so why are we rooting for John? Like, why are we rooting for John Wayne? And I don't know if it's necessarily like you're rooting for John Wayne. I think it's like, this is a broken character. So what is the narrative going to do? What's the screenplay going to do? How is the director going to get the emotions that are going through, and how's John Wayne going to get the emotions that are going through his character out to the audience, and how are we going to grapple with those, and how are we going to deal with that, and where are we going to come down on this character by the end of the movie? And luckily, I initially started off this movie and I'm like, this just seems, it seems just not, what's the word I'm thinking of? It doesn't seem like it doesn't hit your ear right in 2023. You're like, this is all wrong. This is all bad. This guy is like horrible person. But there were a few things right at the beginning that really got me to lock in. And obviously his just like bigotry towards the character who he ends up being with the whole movie, Jeffrey, played by Jeffrey Hunter Martin. And his just like, you're not a real, whatever, you're 1/16th Cherokee or whatever it is. And so he's now one rung lower than everybody else around the table or whatever it is. And that you're kind of like, this isn't, you're like, this is bad. This is not good. What's going on here? But there were a couple of things, I'm not going to give too much away, but at some point, one of the young daughters goes and kneels down in front of a grave, and you find, it turns out to be, it's Natalie Wood's sister.
Yeah,
Lana
I just
Wood.
found that out.
Yeah, it's crazy. But the grave that she's kneeling in front of is John Wayne's mom's grave.
Oh.
And it says killed by Comanche. And so, and her dad's grave, his dad's grave's right next to it, says killed by Comanche. So there's that little piece. And then you're like, okay, so that's his, like, that's his thing against Comanche, or that's plays into his thing against Comanche. He also just came back from the Civil War. So he's seen a lot of war, and he just came back from on the losing side of the Civil War because he was in the Confederacy, because he has that Confederate coat, the great Confederate coat. So then in the last piece that made me like really hook into his character, and he does such a great job, both
yes, he does,
him and his sister-in-law, who I'm feverishly trying to find her name, but there is this look, Dorothy Jordan, I guess. There's this look that they have, and it's right as he's leaving, like everybody's already kind of left, and they're both kind of left in the main room of the cabin together, close to the very beginning of the movie. There's this look that he gives her as he's kind of leaving, and there's more between them, and it's probably some sort of like unrequited love. Maybe they went out when they were younger, and she ended up going out with his brother, and they ended up getting married, and they had a bunch of kids, and it was just never gonna happen for them. And he hasn't let that go. And so the inciting incident close to the beginning of the film is that she and his brother get killed by Comanche, and then the daughter gets taken. So that all of that is compounding. And so not only did he lose his parents from a Comanche attack and raid, but he also lost what could have been his love, what was still probably his love. And it's never done overtly, and it's never done like, hey, remember back when we went out and oh man, we almost got together, and oh, that would have been crazy. None of that. There's none of that on the head type narrative.
It's interesting
still there.
How you're articulating certain things, because I have certain notes written down, and one of my big notes is John Ford allows the audience to figure it out themselves. He always knows the audience is going to figure out these weird time gaps that he goes through. Like, I'll give you an example.
5 years in the movie.
Right. And you have no clue of that until they mention it. When Marty wakes up and has that really cute conversation and then falls over the bench for the first time. And then he's been gone for an hour. But then the next scene literally cuts to them walking into the saloon. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack really quick because I want to get to one little small point, and then we can move forward. So speaking of casting, the Emilio character, the man who takes the money to bring them to Scar and then gives him the money back because he doesn't want his hands, he doesn't want bloody hands. He's the best character in the movie. He's the best human being in the movie. Like he does. Now the kids you can't really count because they haven't a lifetime of messing their life up or having these thoughts and these preconceived notions about each other. They might, but you've got a lot of 1/16 things happening, and it's the term that John Wayne's character uses that I think people in 2023 would be hard pressed to deal with. That said, I agree with you that there are subtle things that gives him a backstory of why he does not like the Comanches, but I was trying to do a lot of evaluating. The grave, you have to be smart enough to pick it up, and he trusts the audience to be smart enough for these time jumps, and he trusts the audience to be smart enough to understand what's going on in these interpersonal relationships and these moments, because there's a lot of overdrawn emotions. That back wrist scream thing, there's
and he dollies in on her too.
It's unnerving and so overwrought and so overdrawn that it's like, okay, I'll come out of it for just a second. I'll come back though. And there's a lot of overdrawn emotions. That said, when he's leaving the house after the Comanches kill all of his relatives, there's a scene or there's just a shot of him looking over his horse. It's just his head and he's looking over his horse, and every single emotion goes across his face of what just happened, what he's been through in life, maybe the stuff that you were just talking about with his sister-in-law, so forth and so on. Because I did pick up on that look, but I wasn't sure what that was. I thought maybe that's just, they have a deep love for each other because they're family, and I get what you're saying though. I can see that.
Yeah.
That said, unfortunately, and it might be the modern day ear, I'm not sure. Unfortunately, the film does come across as antagonist steals young girl, kills mother of protagonist, thus the revenge happens. The need to get her back happens because this happened to my mother, this happened to his mother. Spoiler alert, sorry. I won't say who this is if you don't want me to.
Well, we're going to have to get into spoilers. Right. I mean, so yeah.
But let me just make this point. The truth of the matter though is it does come across very much like you are not white, so you are not right. That's the way it comes across. And you know what? That is okay because it teaches us how not to be, how not to think. Now, if you play into the fact that you agree the Comanches should die just because they're not white, then you in 2023 have a lot of work to do, in my personal opinion. No judgment. I wouldn't even have a conversation. I'm just saying I saw the subtleties of what you're talking about, and there's a couple of discussions I've read online about the ending and redemption and all that stuff. And some people are like, yeah, no, you're reading way too much into it. This is what actually happened, and this is why. And it's a very, very what's the word I'm looking for? Not cynical, just a realistic negative way to look at the ending of the film. And I see it. I can see it. Mm-hmm. So I don't ever want to downplay the fact that it's not there because it is there. That said, you're right. These small little moments that even Marty has some really epic over the top moments, but there are some real subtle, great work going on. But John Wayne is steady as he goes. He's infinitely believable. He pulls off, well, that'll be the day. He pulls it off constantly, and to the point where people like me are trying to do imitations of him because the line readings are perfect. He's natural. He was made to be an on-screen actor. You can feel it. You can see why he was a huge star. He's not classically beautiful, but he's a very good-looking man. But he's not Marty's very classical Hollywood good-looking. Even Scar, the gentleman who plays Scar, very classically good-looking lead men. John Wayne, not so much. But, it's not unattractive. But he has this charisma and this thing about him that you're fighting your 2023 impulses to not like that guy, but somehow, some way he gets in. And I think
it's a confidence.
It is. There's not an insecure bone in his character's body. Not one. A broken bone, a broken soul, a broken heart. He's determined. And I think that the reason why my reinterpretation of why people might have issues, and then my reinterpretation of how I felt about it, or my interpretation of how I felt about it, was that in order for him to have the resolution that he has at the end of the film, you have to have these unbelievably unmistakable character traits. The fact that because she's now been living with the Comanches for 5 years, that's it. He's determined, spoiler, that she cannot live past this point.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean,
right.
and yeah, you're right. We are in spoilers, but I think that's the reason for, well, that could be the 2023 reason for, you know, I keep going back to, like, I mean, there's so many movies where we look at it, where we spend so much time with a character who's not a great character.
Yeah.
But then especially in like more postmodern movies, that not great character just stays not great. And then the movie ends. And in this movie, there's an opening for the character to potentially change.
Absolutely.
We don't get all of it. We don't get to see him, you know, going out to a Comanche, tribe meeting and, you know, doing things with them and giving them food. We don't see any of that. But the first step is he accepts his niece as a human. So, I mean, even though she's been Comanche for 5 years and she feels like that. So, I mean, he's essentially very close to the beginning of the movie, resolute in the fact that she cannot live any farther. Like, she's essentially damaged or something. And now there's an opening that he can understand that, like, these are real people too. These are actual people that have families and all of that. So, I mean, it's you have to extrapolate that. He once again, John Ford doesn't spoon feed that to you, but there is a change, and maybe, you know, the change happens when he's chasing her.
That's
at some point,
horrific. That scene is horrible to watch.
At some point
I thought
in
for
that
sure
chase,
he was gonna.
Yes,
I thought for sure it was.
And he picks her up like she's made out of tissue paper.
I love that. That was great because it calls back to when he picks her up as a girl. That's how you know they're in the same place. And you know what? I think you nailed the word step. It's a step. Now, for modern audiences, and we can continue on without having this conversation from this point on, because we made our point, or at least I feel like I've made my point to a degree. It's a whole nother podcast. And I believe that discussion should happen and that conversation is warranted. That said, it's a step. The fact that he didn't take another human life because of all the reasons why he's been given to take it, whether or not it's part of his DNA, whether or not it's socially acceptable, whether or not he has revenge issues, whatever, it's a step. And so most people would want more. And so, but that's what great epic novels, plays, movies do. They allow you to continue on thinking what you think the character is going to be doing based on whatever your world is, and then you fill in the blanks based on how the character reacted in the film. I think about many books over and over again and the endings of many books, and I'm wondering, I wonder what those people are doing now. It's like they're fictional characters in a book, Paul. They're not doing anything until you open the page. But my mind does wonder. So my mind has wondered many times since seeing this movie, which was only a couple days ago, what the ending really meant. So I don't know where we want to wrap this up. The film's brilliant. Yep. It's epic. It is why you find out why people are talking about it. I got it at the end. I was emotional. It got me, even with the very overdrawn emotions in the beginning. And there's some really interesting things that happen. And John Ford was like, let's go for it. Charlton Heston. I knew I was going to do that. John Wayne. I think about them sometimes as the same person. Anyway, in the very beginning of the movie, he picks up a spear, or he pulls a spear out, and he bops the horse in the head behind him. The horse that's behind him, he hits it in the head. There's a couple of times that those logs, when he's kicking the fire at him, when they're camping, they get really close. There's a couple people who take some tumbles into the river a couple of times. One shot he kept in, and then you can see other people doing things. A horse almost tramples on John Wayne as he's on the side. Yeah, watch it again very specifically. But the point to all that is that John Ford trusts the audience to know before he was telling us where to go. So I get why people talk about this film. We talked about all the reasons why people talk about it being a great film, the problematic parts of it, so forth and so on. It is when it comes down to it, yes, it's a Western. Yes, it's a revenge film. Yes, it has all of these things, but it's really a character study. It's really a character study, and it's really about love, because the two who are supposed to end up together. And I love that. And that whole fight
and Vera
scene.
Miles, we didn't talk about Vera Miles at all, but she's
wonderful.
amazing.
She's beautiful, and she's wonderful, and she's a grounding. When she says, "I read that letter to turned to parchment, or it faded in my hands," and it's amazing. And then he gets pushed down that bench again. That's funny. And she turns, she goes, "You did happen again. You did it again." Yeah, it's hilarious. And the wedding fight sequence and the wedding scene or fight is hilarious.
Yeah.
And then the guy who plays Charlie, there's your Oscar nominee. Why was he not nominated? He was great.
He went for it, man. I see him all the time because MeTV is one of our affiliates, and he's on Gunsmoke.
Of course he is.
I mean, and he plays an older character, even though it's only like, I don't know, 5 years later. They completely changed like his look, and so yeah. But I noticed, I'm like, yeah, I think I recognize him, but yeah, Ken Curtis.
I was thinking to myself, because he's got that whole smile thing going. Yeah, I'm right where I'm supposed to be. It's so great. And you're thinking that's a one-note character, which is great. But as soon as he hears Marty's back on his wedding night, his face goes blank, and he turns as stern as I've ever seen a character. And what's he say? I think you should get your hands off my fiance.
My fiance.
Yeah. So
it reminded
great.
me of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
It's so great, but it's
fiancé, I think is what he says.
Fiancé, right. But it's
horrible.
so consistent that you cannot deny it. And then when he turns at the end of the fight and he says something about, or somebody says, I guess we need to go on with the wedding. And he says something along the lines of, there's a lot of discussing before, there's things to talk about before we go on. Those are not the lines, but the way he delivers them, they're perfect. He is perfect. And so is Mose. I love that character with his rocking chair. I love that guy. So it's definitely, the movie has its trappings, but it's definitely worth checking out if you love film, because now I'm like, yay, I understand why. I'm in the loop now.
So as far as Shane goes, since we're going to move on to Shane, directed by George Stevens, I didn't like glom onto that one as much. It seems like a much more one note type of a movie. And when I found out that little kid was nominated for Best Supporting Actor Academy Award, I just about gave up, because no.
So was Jack Palance.
I know Jack Palance should have been. I mean, he's one of those. He has like 5 lines, but like he's the man in the black hat. Like he's one of those like characters where he doesn't have to say anything. His presence is there.
No, I get why you're saying that, but I think the kid did his job, and it's the kid's movie. It's his story.
They like spray some water on his face. And he's crying.
Stop. He's an Academy Award nominee. Come on. I get it. He's got the line. He's got the emotional scene at the end. It's why
I know
it's not necessary. And I think that Jack Palance got a nomination for his personality. Like the character's personality, at least. I mean, other than a few, yeah, you're right. He says 5 things. He's in 4 little scenes, but his presence is omni. I mean, it's just there. You can't not focus on him. He is a very strange, and I feel superficial, I'm talking about people's looks, but there's a very distinct look that he has. It's not unattractive, but he's the bad guy just by his countenance. It.
I think that was it Obi-Wan or was it Mandalorian season 2? There's that kind of like gunslinger guy that has the hat and he's an alien, but he has like a hat, like a black hat, and he's like one of the bad guys. And I think that they either modeled him off of Jack Palance or Lee Van Cleef, but it definitely reminded me of that. So it's interesting how you kind of see, this is the first time I've seen Jack Palance as this character, or as this kind of like the baddie in a Western. But of course I saw him in City Slickers, And of course I've seen him, you know, in a hat and, you know, on a ranch and all of that. Like, I mean, but he was playing up all of those characters that he played before. So it's a weird, like, backing into a cultural icon type of a situation where it's like, I saw all of the permutations of that character before I got to see the actual originating character, or one of the originating characters in this movie. So
Worth the wait. Like, worth the wait.
Yeah.
See, I took to Shane more so than The Searchers at first. Shane was solid.
It's a play.
Well, it's solid from the beginning, middle, and end, and not The Searchers. Not that The Searchers isn't, and maybe because the Searchers makes you fill in the blanks on some level, but the tension and the heightened emotion in Shane got me. That movie is tension filled from moment one, and just when you think you're okay, boom, there's another thing happening. There is a tight fishing wire tension being sewn through that film, and I don't know, I loved it. I thought it was I don't think there's a misstep in the film. Is it as leveled? Maybe not, but what is going on with him and her in the beginning of the film, Shane and the wife? There's looks and strange. I thought that they used to be
so you got that feeling from this movie. Yeah, and I got the feeling from The Searchers.
I thought that when you were saying.
I didn't get that. I didn't see that. You can tell that just the fact that he's so skittish at the very beginning. That Alan Ladd, who plays Shane,
he's great
at the beginning of the film. That he's skittish because he's just gone through a lot, and he's had a lot of gun battles, and he's gotten through all of them, and he's just a wanderer. But I think that he looks at her as a wife that he's never going to have.
And she looks at him as more security for the life that she already has. She's go back and watch it again. There's a lot of shots of him and her looking at each other in the very beginning of the film, and there's no interpretation for it at all.
Well, and maybe she's because her husband, played by Van Heflin, Joe.
You're gonna get those names right this time, aren't you? This movie, you're gonna get these names right.
His performance is actually, it was one of those. It was one of the. I felt, especially from the very beginning, it was naturalistic, and it felt. What's our thing? Actors who have it, or actors who, I mean, that his delivery of dialogue is so naturalistic. Whereas Jean Arthur, who plays his wife, she was like hamming it up for the back row, which is fine. I mean, it's okay in a movie like this. So was Alan Ladd to a certain extent, but Van Heflin was I think grounded a lot more. But
okay, anyway. I'm going to defend her a little bit. Did she ever go?
No, I mean, she did not.
And that sounded like more of a Native American call than it did scream. But that scream is so epic when the women do that. Yeah. And even Marty does that in The Searchers too, by the way. He does do some kind of like little like Boba Fett scream. But I don't know. I found even Jean Arthur, I know exactly what you're talking about. Even the melodramatic, I think it added to it versus pulled me out of it.
Okay.
And I thought that the majority of the characters here, their line deliveries were on point. There was all the bad guys on point. There's not a stinker in the bunch, even though they're bad people. The brother who owns the land, the guy who owns all of it, Gaffney, what's his name? The guy at the end who's sitting down, who's got the long white beard, and his brother's upstairs. He thinks it's his land.
I think he's Raker. Rufus Raker is the character's name, but it's played by Emil Meyer. But anyway, they both have beards, have big long white beards.
Oh, that's right. Grafton was the saloon,
the store owner.
Okay. And his name was on the side of the building. So even he was great. I excused the young boy because it didn't pull me out of it. It didn't. I think that Shane is the character he wants to grow up to be because he is imagining the world of being a gunslinger.
Yes.
And then by the end of the film, obviously he has more of a perspective. Not really, though. He's still just a kid. But yeah, I don't know. There's something, the whole film was way more hunkered down in reality if you're comparing it to The Searchers for me. And it was 3 years before it, because this is 1953. The Searchers was 1956. And strangely enough, it never dawned on me until I was writing my notes last night that we were talking about two different Westerns that we'd never seen. It when we decided to do this. I
thought you did that on purpose.
No, not at all. No,
Really?
I saw your list and I was like, I've never seen Shane and I've never seen The Searchers. Let's see those. And then I watched them both and never did it dawn on me that we're, talking about two different Westerns. How silly is that? Because my perception on movies is so in tune.
No, I locked in on like, this is the genre we're doing. And I thought, that would
didn't even
see.
think.
And I've never seen Alan Ladd in anything.
He's great.
I know his son was a producer for a while. And he was one of the people I think that produced Blade Runner. So
really?
I'm down for that. So yeah, keep going, dude. But I never really saw that. I think back to your point about Jean Arthur's look at him. I think Jean Arthur's kind of view is that like she wants the husband that she has, but then she knows that all the world around them is so dangerous. And that, it's kind of great to have a compliment to that in
That's
Shane.
What I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same, but like they're two, both of them together would be like the quote unquote perfect husband, but you're not going to get that. So it's not the relationship isn't directly the same. Yeah.
I find it interesting that that's the thing that my mind went to first when there are layers to human beings other than sexual attraction or the need to be with the opposite sex. There are other things going on in life other than that. And the fact that my, once again, limited, simple mind went exactly there beforehand. But I realized it was more complex later on when she strength in numbers. They even say it in the film. They even say something along the lines. And I just think that I also think that she saw this man was hurt and need to recover from his whole past and everything that he's done. And he doesn't play it like that. And it's there though. Like
he's trying to escape into their life.
Right.
But it turns out that they need him more than he needs them at that moment.
See, I find that fascinating. I think that's really great writing. I think that I was intrigued by where it was going. I mean, where it's going. There's no doubt about it. And it has every cliche in it. Although I got all the way to the end of this movie and some thought went through my head. No one has fallen off the top of a roof of a building and fallen into a horse stand. No one. In these two films, no one. And then at the end of Shane, the brother falls from the top to the bottom. It's not exactly the outside saloon scene and shooting through the window and the
pretty close though.
Pretty enough to say it's there. Because
also Shane, the kid says to him, Shane, he's whatever he says. Yeah, like Shane, he's behind you or something like that. And I was like, there's definitely been I saw so many like retroactive homages. Like I didn't realize they were homages, but then they are. Like I assumed that are you speaking to me? I don't see anyone else here. Like that kind of interchange the first time he's in the bar, the first time Alan Ladd's in the bar. I assumed that was Taxi Driver, but it turns out I guess it isn't. De Niro said he came up with that or something. I don't know.
That was it. Well, I mean, you never know what's in your mind.
It could have been in his brain from that.
But things do come out of that film that have become part of our language. That whole thing about good guns and bad guns in the hands of a good man or a bad man. Now that's been used for.
We said it's a tool. I mean,
and people use it for not reasons I just brought it up, and I just want to make that clear. I'm not on board with why some people.
Yeah, you may be conflating good guy with a gun, bad guy with a gun, as opposed to like a gun is a tool. The way he said it, at least the way I took it, was that like it's like a shovel or a hammer. Like you use a hammer to hammer in nails. You use a shovel to dig up dirt. You use a gun to shoot things. Like
he specifically says. A gun gun in a good man's hand is not a problem. It's when a gun is in a bad. That's not the exact line. True. And Charlton Heston, got to say his name again. He has actually used that as a reason for whole another subject, and I'm not on board with that. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, speaking of homages, though, I did want to bring up another one because it's not an homage, but I definitely got the first time we walked into the bar, I got A History of Violence vibes, except it's the guys coming into his coffee shop and that, where it's like he's walking in there and they're like, hey, you're a pushover like all the other pushover sod busters, you know, and they don't realize that he's not a pushover. And, you know, it's that. But he's trying his hardest. He's like, no, I've turned over a new leaf or whatever. I'm living a new life. I'm gonna, you know, I'm taking all of that violence and putting it behind me.
Yeah,
but
I think he just doesn't want to kill somebody that night. And his
Well,
first
that's
night
it,
in town
probably.
with his new clothes on.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
he doesn't want to get blood on the new clothes that he even says, I haven't bought my own clothes in a while.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's kind of like when you get new shoes, you kind of walk strangely because
Also
until
that-
they break in.
I just realized, haven't bought my own clothes in a while. I wonder if like he takes clothes from people he kills. So that is a whole nother like wrinkle.
You have got to start writing your thoughts down and put them in a book. So when you can look back on your life, you're going to say, wow, I'm such a good person. Where are these dark thoughts coming from?
No, but I mean, like that would make that line mean more. If you ascribe to the fact of like every line is important, you know, why, you know, every frame of film is important. Why is this character saying this?
Because
is
he's
there
going-
a way to take, take the lines out, then do it, you know? that whole
No,
thing.
it's an indication to the audience the man's trying to change.
Yeah,
Literally
well,
and
that's true.
figuratively.
Yeah, maybe he never cared about whatever, about
He's
clothes
probably been
before
wearing
now.
that thingy.
Yeah, they kind of, like
his-
the lambskin or whatever it was.
Imagine
yeah.
what it smells like. Oh my God.
Yeesh.
People. The worst. Can you even imagine? Ugh. So
So
gross.
this movie was directed by George Stevens, who directed Giant, which we talked about
Yep,
actually.
loved it.
And Diary of Anne Frank, which I have not seen.
I just watched it like 6 months ago.
Yeah. Oh, cool. And he got nominated. It won for cinematography for the Academy Award for cinematography.
Shane.
Yes.
Okay.
2 supporting actors, both, Palance and the kid. And then George Stevens got nominated for Best Picture and Screenplay. So, I mean, this thing showed up, but I mean, there were, it was a pretty big year too, because I looked up the, like who else was nominated in that year, and William Holden won for Best Actor in a Leading Role for Stalag 17. Frank Sinatra won that year for From Here to Eternity. Roman Holiday came out that year. I mean, it was there. You had some big movies that year, so
Deserved.
I mean, they were up.
Deserved.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra is great in that movie. If anybody doubts that movie, he is great in it. After his character goes through what he goes through, you're like, oh, okay, here we go. That's why. And I love Stalag 17. I think that's a great movie. I think
It is.
And I
It is
love
great.
that William Holden is the anti-hero, but doesn't care. He doesn't care if you think he doesn't care.
Yep.
You want to escape? I know how to do it the best. You're a bad guy. Yeah, I am. Do you want to
So
escape?
this is a slight diversion, but this is who he was up against that year: William Holden, Burt Lancaster, Montgomery Clift, Marlon Brando, and Richard Burton.
Richard Burton for
The Robe.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Montgomery
seen that.
Clift from Here to Eternity.
Yeah.
And who else?
Burt Lancaster from Here to Eternity.
Right.
And then Marlon Brando and Julius Caesar, which
Yeah, I've never seen that. Maybe that'll be
Yeah.
my next Shakespeare play I'll delve into and I can watch it. But yeah, no, that's a tough year, but
yeah,
I think
Still.
they picked the right person.
there you go.
I think they did.
So, all right. What else you got?
Well, I've said a lot of the stuff, the naturalism, the bar fight.
No score. What is going on there?
Epically great. I love that there's no score. I love that just when you think it's gone past the point of no return, it keeps going. And I don't know how they filmed that. I don't understand it. And did you notice that George Stevens, he kept doing these things where they were behind a table leg, or they were underneath a chair, or they were by a side of a table that was turned over, and the fight happened on the floor and the camera's down low watching it from underneath all of that. The boys' perspective, all the boys' perspective. There are hardly ever any wide shots of the fight. They're all very 1, 2, 3 takes, whatever it may be.
And this is before handheld, really. I mean, there just isn't handheld.
Right. And then later on, closer to the end of the film, there's not a whole lot of spoilers for this film, because it goes right down the line of what you think it's going to be. But that's not a bad thing. Coda, right down the line. And yet it was beautiful. And then when you get to that fight sequence at the end of the film, when they're fighting each other about him, let me get the names right. So I'm not doing a Josh tonight. I can't get my phone to work, of course. Okay. When Shane and Joe are fighting at the end, and the animals are trying to jump over the stockade, and the animals are trying to break through. That was crazy.
That's tense.
And I watched it again 2 more times, just that sequence, because later on, like earlier today, I saw the film yesterday, I think. And I was trying to see if there were any human beings in any of those shots, because they look awfully dangerous. And I'm wondering what they did to get the animals to do that. Probably unethical as hell. Yeah. But the shot, I mean, it's not an excuse to do something to an animal, but the shot, they don't do anything horrific. I hope no animals got hurt, but the shot is incredible. And he does it once again. There's a shot of them fighting, rolling on the ground, and the legs of the horse keeps walking in front of the camera, and the camera keeps going back and forth. It's epically great. I was like, that's a brave shot, because most people were like, I can't see the fight. What are you doing? You got all this stuff going on. And then back to the bar fight, that goes on for another 3 minutes past the time you think it should have stopped. And that's what I think is brilliant about it. I was like, this is why we come to films like this. This is exactly why. It's like going to a Star Wars film, the main films, and not seeing a lightsaber fight. Mm-hmm. You have to. It's part of it.
It's the spectacle. Yeah.
Yeah. And like I said, the tensions are always high. And then the last thing on my notes is, when I realized Jack Palance had been nominated for the Oscar, I started thinking back. But at the time, it registered too. Do you remember at the end of the film when Jack Palance he gets off of his horse in front of him, and he does it very slowly and deliberately? I can't remember what's going on in that sequence now, but it's close to the end of the film. It's where he's gonna, I can't remember the sequence. I think it's when Shane goes back to start that fight, and Jack Palance comes in on his horse, and slowly Jack Palance just slowly lifts himself off the horse and slides down the side of it, just steps down. And you're like, that is the coolest way I've ever seen anybody get off a horse in my life. It's so purposeful. It's so character driven. I don't even know if it was intentional, but it was. He never stops. He never loses eye contact with Shane, nothing. And then he gets back on it the exact same way. And watch it again. It's almost like he's lifted up mechanically and is put on. It's really an interesting shot, and it's a really interesting character moment. So I was like, that was unnerving. Just him getting off of a horse freaked me out. So, and then the steadiness of Alan Ladd, just the constant steadiness of his demeanor helped me get through the film, because the movie is it's riddled with tension. I'm not afraid of anything. I'll go up to those people. You know that character's doomed from the moment he opens his mouth and is so confident about it. And he gets drunk at the 4th of July thing, and you just know that something not good is going to happen to somebody. And then when it's him, that the not good thing happens, and it's not a good thing. Yeah. Like, okay, that makes total sense. 100% total sense. And also, and this might be my last thought, I don't know much about how the country was settled land-wise, because I got the impression that the one guy owned the land and he was the cattle rancher, and then the government allowed them to do that Far and Away thing, that Ron Howard film with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman,
where they had claims that they would stake.
Right. And because they kept saying, this is my claim, this is my claim. Yep. So now I'm going to venture down a rabbit hole of what exactly all of that meant, because they don't fill you in enough in the movie. They do, but they don't really. I don't know the history, and now I'm interested. And I don't think, Far and Away was interesting.
Yeah.
To a degree. It didn't spark my mind. I was like, I didn't know that kind of stuff happened. I didn't know somebody was using it as a cattle ranch, and then the government said, no, you can't have all that land. You have to, and then the other
parcel
it out. Yeah. The other thing is that, did you notice how close those, and I know there are sets and they're not real people's houses, but I was wondering about the technicality of this, like how much they worry about the realism of that world back when they were making a film in 1953. Was it because people are all the time nowadays going, oh, that Diet Pepsi didn't exist in 19 whatever when it's in the film. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. People got a lot of time on their hand. They have the internet. I get it. But did you notice how close those houses were to the river? Like you
yes. It was like if the river kind of came up a little bit, then you'd have been whoosh,
yeah, that's
washed
what
out.
I'm sure that was just for movie sake, because it's part of the movie, because the guy says later on, even my river was cut into, I was cut off from this, I was cut off from that. They bordered around my river. He says something along the line. So it's supposed to be like that. It would be a great place to live, because living right by the river like that, it's a good sleep,
Mm-hmm.
But I kept thinking to myself, you have a rainy August and you're gonna,
you're knee deep in water in your kitchen. Yeah.
So once again, another thing to research how much of that was truth and whatever else. So in a way, the movie did its job. It entertained me for 2 hours. I learned stuff about characters I didn't know about, and I'm now wondering about a lifestyle that I don't really know about. So all in all, win-win.
So let's talk about the end, and obviously spoilers for the end if you haven't
seen the end a million times because you live in this world.
It's just around, but still. So, Shane come back, all that stuff. I guess I don't know the actual line that he has, come back, Shane. I don't know if it's Shane.
I think he says, Shane, come back. But everybody says, come back, Shane, come back. Everybody says that.
So, well, it's
just
like Luke, I am your father.
Right. And it's not that. It's Luke.
Nope.
What is it?
No. He doesn't say, Luke, I am your father.
Oh, that's right.
Says, I am your father.
Right. Right.
But
that's an easy mess up, though.
There you go.
Yeah.
Trying to, we're just trying to have context.
Play it again, Sam.
That's never happened.
Never. Isn't that disappointing, though? Don't you want them?
Right.
That's a brilliant, perfect movie. I would never want to change anything, but don't you want to just edit it in there every once in a while, just so you can have it, because you're so used to it,
I know. Oof. So at the end, the kid says that he's hurt. He's like, oh, there's blood. You're hurt.
You see him get shot.
And you see him get shot, yes. But they verify it with the kid saying, oh, you're hurt. And then he rides away. And I've always heard this is the one Shane, trope or thing that is known, that I've known about Shane for the longest time, is that I guess there's some sort of a debate, or maybe there's a debate, or maybe I made it up. I don't know, that Shane is actually dead as he is riding away, or he's dying as he's riding away. And the last shot we see is him kind of like his horse, like going up a mountain or going up a hill or whatever. And he's dead or something.
Not just going up a hill. What's he going up? What hill does he cross? Cemetery Hill.
Oh, I did. Okay.
That's probably where the debate. It did cross my mind, and I have, unless it's part of my DNA in my head. Yeah. That this conversation has happened and I've heard it somewhere. I did not know it was a thing with Shane, but I wondered that, because why does he bring that up at the end? Mm-hmm. The boy says, oh, there's blood. Like you said, why does he bring, and then as you see him go over the hill, he's going over the cemetery hill. So why did he choose to do that exit?
Well, why did he? He obviously chose to leave for good.
But he had to go all the way outside the town and all the way up that hill and come all the way back down. It was all the way on the other side of the town. It's not like going through the town.
Unless he's dead and his horse is just walking.
But, okay, so be it.
It's either way, but there is a 0% chance that he is dead on that horse. So, yeah, that's...
meaning there is a percentage of a chance
That's
that he's
right.
dead, right?
Correct.
What the hell was that? A non-zero chance of him being dead?
Okay. Is that at work? We say, somebody's like, "Oh, what are the chances that that's going to happen?" And we say it's a chance greater than zero.
Oh, okay. So this is a
it's a percentage greater than zero.
You should hook up with a screenwriter and put that in a film because they'll mess that line up for centuries.
Yeah, probably.
People will have interpretations of that line for centuries. Yes, I did think it. And I thought it was brilliant that the question was posed and never answered, because why wouldn't he stay? Now, he just murdered a bunch of guys. Yes. Okay.
And he's also bringing violence to the area, but he's essentially like doing his thing. Everything's going to potentially cool down, and then he gets out.
Jack Palance does and his name's Jack Wilson. And Jack Wilson, that's right. You're Jack Wilson. I've heard about you. When he kills that guy, baits him into that argument and then kills that guy, there's a time in between him pulling his gun and Jack Palance finally shooting him. That guy was clear. That guy was not a threat to him. He killed him anyway. So they brought the violence. First of all, this was retribution for the violence to begin with, to leave these people alone. Yeah. They burned those people's houses down. And I love the fact that they're taking little buckets and plates and trying to, desperate times, I guess.
Well, that's rough.
Rough.
I ultimately think that he realizes he's not going to ever have, he's not going to have her as a wife, and they're not, and them as a family, and the reason why he had an opportunity. He had an opportunity to, because she even said, Arthur, Jan Arthur, what's her name? Jean Arthur. She even said to her husband, Joe, she was like, "Hey, we can leave. Let's leave." And he's like, "No, you love this place." So there was a situation that was set up there where he would have gone and Jack Palance would have killed him, and then Jean Arthur and her son would have had no man to be there for them. And so then, Shane could have swooped in and
walks extremely good looking Alan Ladd.
There you go. And he would have
nothing to do. I've got nothing to do.
Hey, and then she obviously already said she was fine moving. And so he would have been like, all right, well, let's get out of here away from these dangerous people.
We are living in a happily ever after world. You know that? Because we are bound and determined to take this platonic friendship that these two people have and turn it into something else. We've been trying to do it from moment one. Our brains will not allow us to not believe that they will live happily ever after.
Well, it's not that but that's what he wants. Like, that's what Shane wants. It seems like he wants some sort of a non-violent life. Because that's why he's pausing there.
Yeah, he's pausing there for convenience, first of all. I don't think that he set out to find a place to hunker down. I think that happened to him. And now that he's in a non-violent place that he's used to, the violence there is not what he's used to. The violence that he's used to is constant, blah, blah, blah. He's probably been a gun for hire. He's probably killed a whole bunch of people for 1,000 different reasons he would never admit to. There's the reasons why people go out and kill people in Westerns are phenomenal. You've seen Unforgiven, right?
Mm-hmm.
The whole reason why that lady gets her face slashed up is because she laughs at the man naked. And that the whole film is based on trying to kill him for slashing her up over her laughing at his lack of genetics. Come on. You really have to be, but in their world, in our world, it's a sensitive subject. So I'm not justifying it, but I think Shane is done. But I think he was just traveling as a respite place, and he just happened upon this. He says something about that in the beginning of the film. I'm just wandering through. I'm just traveling by. And then he realizes that he has a warm place to stay, food, people, a young kid who looks up to him, and there's a mutual attraction to all of it. Not necessarily
not just her.
Yeah. Right. It's not, it's platonic all the way around. And he's like the greatest uncle in the world. Mm-hmm. So yes, I think he wanted to, but ultimately his character has been etched in stone. His fate has been etched in stone from the day he was conceived. He's going to end in a tragic, epic battle. It's just the way it's written in the stars for him. So for him to end any other way would have been completely unsatisfying, especially since let me get it right again. Marion and Joe Starrett, they were in love with each other. The way he looks at her, oh, you're wearing your wedding dress. It was so nice. It's so sweet. And her whole like, don't go, Joe, don't go. It was so powerful. And like, you knew they were
definitely in love.
Yeah, totally 100% in love. So I'm not sure. Is he dead at the end? I'm not sure. Is it an interesting debate? I could spend hours at a party having drinks talking about it.
Yeah,
so it's
cool.
I feel so completely satisfied with the 2 movies that we watched this week, and so completely happy that now I could say I've seen both films.
Yep.
Because I think I've seen parts of each film over the years, and I've seen and they talk about it, and come back, Shane, come back, whatever it may be, is in every montage, everything. So it's just, now I'm in on it. And I'm glad, to be, because there are some films that people say are great films, and you watch them and you go, oh, I don't really get what this is.
Yeah.
Not a lot, but sometimes that happens. Or, go see Guardians of the Galaxy 3. By the way, I saw it a second time.
Okay.
I loved it a lot more.
Okay.
I kind of take back everything I said about it that was not so good.
Wow.
I do.
Okay.
I feel so stupid about that Adam Warlock thing where I thought he was going to kill his mom. Where was I? I must have reached down to get imaginary popcorn, because I was like, what?
No.
I guess I blame the film for my misunderstanding, by the way. No, I take it all back. I had such a good time. I went with my nephew. We laughed. Drax is hilarious. Anyway, the point is that sometimes when you see movies that people recommend or talk about and say are great, you go, okay, well, not really sure. These 2 movies are not that. They're both worth seeing, even if you're not a film buff. You just have to give yourself over. This, Shane, was a lot more adaptable to my 2023 sensibility than The Searchers. But the antagonist and protagonist in each film, first of all, in The Searchers is questionable who's what. And in this one is very clear. And we leave all the indigenous people alone. Leave them alone. Let's battle between ourselves for land. We'll talk about all the other reasons why the land really doesn't belong to us in another film. In another film. That's not this one. This is the bad guy. This is the good guy. It's very clear. I like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right. Well, you can check us out on the web at actorandengineer.com. You can go to facebook.com/actorandengineer. And you can tweet us at Actor Engineer. And you can find us on YouTube. Just search for the Actor and the Engineer podcast. And we'll see you next time.